Hey guys, Will here from PyTop again, and in this final video in our short series on 3D printing, we'll be talking about how you can print and assemble the Maker Mask. Now, at the time of making this video, there are 3 different types of Maker Mask available, and I've got some of the parts laid out on the table in front of me here. On the left-hand side here, you can see we've got the full-size respirator. This is the original Maker Mask designed for adults. This one in the middle is the children's respirator. Functionally, it is identical to the adult respirator. This one was designed for kids, people with smaller faces. And finally, a more recent addition, this one on the right here is the Rapid respirator. This one consists of only 3 parts and can be put together really very quickly. Now, this mask is made up of a couple of different sections. The main body of the mask we'll refer to as the mask, simple enough. These things you see on the side here are filters, referred to as the left and right filter, respectively. And this one in the front is called the front filter. Now you can see I've printed some of the parts here for the left and right filter. Note that the left and right filters are identical and you can use them either way around. I've printed them in different colors because it makes it slightly easier when I'm demonstrating. Here on the right here, you can see I've got the front valve. This will go on the front of the mask. And then over here, these white pieces are for the back strap. You'll attach the elastic to these so that you can easily keep the mask on your face. Now there are a couple of other pieces that you'll need to complete your build. You'll be able to find these around the house, and there'll be some tools as well. But before we get onto that, let's talk about how you can correctly set up these pieces in your Slicer software and print them so that you're ready to build. Okay, setting up parts for 3D printing for the Maker Mask is actually pretty straightforward. So for this demo, we're going to be using the Monoprice Select Mini. As we saw in a previous video, in Cura, you can select on the left-hand side here the printer you'll be using. If you don't have it, you can add it in the Manage Printers menu. We're going to use the Monoprice Select Mini, and the material we'll be using is going to be generic PLA, so if we select that, if you do plan on using a different material, then obviously you want to select that. So first, let's open the Maker Mask folder using the Open File button. Now there are a few different versions of the mask, and at the time of making this video at the end of May, the latest version is Children's Maker Mask 5.15. So we want to open that up. Let's start by taking a quick peek at what we're looking at here. So these are all the parts that we're going to be making. You can see we've got the filters, the front filter here, and obviously the mask body itself. So we'll close that. Let's start with the most simple piece of all, and that is Maker Mask Children's Respirator. Now when the model comes in, you'll see it's highlighted yellow and grey, which means it's not currently printable, and in this case that's because it doesn't fit perfectly on the build plate. So you want to use the rotate button here on the left, rotate it 45 degrees, and then you can use the move button, and you want to view the model from above. So let's take a look at it from above, and just move the model into place until you see it's a solid yellow colour. When it's solid yellow, that means that it is printable. Now for the particular settings of this model, we're going to use 0.175, which is the normal layer thickness, an infill of 20%, and in this case, we're first going to try without support and without adhesion. These models have been designed to not require support, and if you're lucky, they may not require adhesion either, but you may find that if your print fails, you'll have to add adhesion, and you can also experiment with different layer heights as well. So as we've discussed before, we'll press Slice to slice this model, and then use the preview button, and we can see that this one is ready to go. And once again, with the slider on the right hand side, we can view it layer by layer to make sure that we're happy with how the model is looking. Okay, so once we've got the main respirator printed, let's take a look at a few of the other parts that we have to print. In the filter folder here, we have the filter cover, the filter offset, the filter itself, and a spring. Now these are all pretty straightforward to print. What you need to keep in mind for the filter folder is that we'll be printing 2 filters, so you want to print one of each part in the filter folder. This is how it'll orient, so if you put it on the bed like this should print nicely. We'll use the same settings as before that we used on the respirator, and we'll try and fit on as many of the filter cover, filter offset, and the spring as we can. The larger your print bed, the more parts you'll be able to fit in at one time. Next, we'll look at the side valve. The side valve is what connects the respirator to the filter, and that consists of a grommet, a twist ring, and a valve. Like the filter, we'll need 2 of each of these pieces. If we quickly take a look at the valve here, because the valve is such a small and delicate part, you may want to try printing this in a smaller resolution. So we'll try lowering the resolution of this part using this slider here, so we'll bring that all the way down. Now in the case of the Monoprice Select Mini, the thinnest resolution that it'll do is supposedly 0.0437mm, which sounds very fine indeed, but it should be fine enough that we get a nice clean valve printed here. Okay, that's the side filters taken care of. Let's take a look at the front filter in the Front Valve V2 NIH edition. This one consists of a couple of parts. We've got the flap here. Once again, we'll want to print this one probably in a fine resolution. We've got the front filter template, which is used to cut out the filter from the vacuum bag material. We've got the front valve piece, the front valve inside mesh, the push pin, and the twist ring. The two most notable pieces of this are the front valve and the front valve inside mesh. Let's take a look at the front valve here. Now this piece is actually pretty cool because it demonstrates something called bridging. So as it currently looks, you can see you've got these bars that run along the top here. Now if I slice the part and then go to the preview button, it might not seem like this is actually printable because there's nothing to support those bars that go across the middle here. But actually it turns out that your 3D printer should be able to do something called bridging, where it simply bridges the gap as it goes. Experiment with this and see what happens, but you should find that you're able to just place the part down like this without any additional supports, and it should print just fine. This is a good example of pushing 3D printers to their limits. Back in the menu, and these other parts are pretty unremarkable and can be printed in normal resolution. So now we've printed the side filters, the front filter, and the side valve for the side filters. We've also done the respirator, which just leaves the straps. Now the straps consist of the back hook strap, the back ring strap, a slightly thicker version of the back ring strap if you prefer, and then the bottom strap attachment and the strap attachment. You'll need 2 of these strap attachments and 1 of each of these other parts. We'll take a quick look at the bottom strap attachment, which on the Monoprice Select Mini won't fit in unless, once again, we use the rotate tool and rotate it 45 degrees, and then we can move it into an area where the whole thing can be printed. So we see now it's solid yellow. Now because these strap pieces have quite fine detailing on these little teeth here, which are used to grab the elastic, you might want to play around with the resolution you use and try a slightly finer resolution just for these strap pieces. You can try a thicker resolution first, but if you find that these parts aren't pinching the elastic as you expect, go for a slightly thinner resolution. And as with all parts that we've seen so far, you won't need any support and you shouldn't need any adhesion either. And that's it. Once you've printed all of those parts, you should have every piece in this exploded model here, and you'll be ready to assemble your Maker Mask. Okay, great stuff. So now that you've 3D printed all the parts that you need, get them laid out on the table, and we'll talk about what else you're going to need to complete the build. So if I start with this mask here to demonstrate, I'm going to flip it over, and on the bottom here you can see around the mask piece I've got this white strip. Now this is a draft excluder, also known as weather strip or weather seal, which is something you can buy in any hardware store. You might even have some lying around already, and this is used to make sure that the mask keeps a good seal on your face. So when it's on, no air can escape out the sides. Okay, next up we're going to turn the mask over, and you can see on the front here we'll need these elastic straps so that you have a way of keeping the mask on your face. Now there's a bunch of different types of strap you can use, really anything that's elasticated will do. So I've got a few different types here. I've got a pretty thick one there that I bought. I also have some much thinner ones that I've also got, and really you can experiment with anything that you've got around the house or that is easily or cheaply available. Okay, so next up is the single most important part of your build, and that's the filter. Now, obviously we don't all have a normal mask filter lying around the house, so what we're using instead is vacuum cleaner or Hoover bags. These are really good at filtering out very fine particles from the air. And you can check the Maker Mask website for more information on which vacuum bags are going to work the best for this project. Okay, next up is my personal favorite part, and that's the tools that you're going to need for the project. Now I've got a big set of tools on the side here, which might look a bit intimidating at first. You don't actually need all of these tools for this project, but some of them are really just useful to have. So we'll start from the top. This is a hot glue gun. That can be very handy to make sure things are properly sealed, but it certainly isn't necessary. I've got some side cutters, because side cutters are always very useful. Tweezers as well, 2 different pairs, a blunt nose tweezer and a sharp nose tweezer. I've got a Sharpie or pen here, always extremely useful. Super glue will be necessary. We've got some needle nose pliers. That can be very useful in some particular parts of this build that we'll find out more about later. Scissors we're going to need to cut out the filter material into the right shape. And finally, you'll need a heat source. Now, a lighter will do this absolutely fine, whatever you've got lying around. You can also use a hot air gun if you've got one, and if all else fails, this stage can also be done with a bowl of very hot water. Okay, so to begin with, we're going to start by assembling the front filter, and you're going to need these parts here for that. Now to begin with, it's very important that you don't have any glue residue left on any of your parts from when they were 3D printed, so be sure to wash them in warm water first just to make sure they're clean. Once you've done that, it's time to assemble the front filter. The very first step here is going to be to cut out the filter material that goes inside the front filter. So to do that, you're going to need the filter template that you've 3D printed. Take the vacuum bag that you've got, grab your scissors, and let's cut out a section of material that we can then use to make the filter. Okay, so once you've roughly cut out your filter material, you're going to place it down on the desk and you're going to use the 3D printed template to draw around with your marker, told you it'd come in handy, the shape for the filter. Now cut the filter and make sure you don't go over the line. Okay, so once you've cut out your filter, take the front filter assembly and just make sure it fits in nicely. And then over the top of that, place the front filter cover. Now this thing is going to have a little bit of resistance if you've just printed it, but you should be able to get it in just by clicking it with a bit of force. Okay, looks good. So next up we're going to install the valve to make sure that air can only flow in one direction. So grab the valve flap and place it over the top of this, making sure that the small braille notch faces outwards. Then use the tiny little pin piece, which you'll see has a small key shape on it, and place that into the hole to lock the valve flap and the filter together. Now you might need to be a little bit firm to make sure you get that pin in, but once you've pushed, you should find it fits in nicely. Okay, so our front filter assembly is now complete, so we're going to install it into the mask. It goes in from the inside, so make sure that you align the triangle correctly with the hole inside the mask. Place it in from the inside and push it through. Now the filter is quite a tight fit, so you might find that things don't fit in too smoothly. If that happens, take the file that you've got amongst your tools and just gently file down some of the edges to make a little bit more space for the parts. Don't file too much though, because we do still want to keep a good air seal. Make sure that the filter is pushed as far through the mask as it will go. Once it is, take the front retainer ring and align it so that the small braille dot found on the front retainer ring is in the same side of the mask as your forehead, so on the top. And then you want to place the retainer ring straight over there and simply twist it to lock the front filter in place. Easy as that. Okay, so with the first step complete, let's move on to the side filters. Now the first step with these side filters is actually an optional one. You have the option to install a valve in the filters. The valve will control the flow of air and it will also help to increase the longevity of your filters, but if you don't want to add this little step, you can skip over it. To add your side valve, take the side valve piece and lay it flat on the table, and also take the small flap piece. Then you want to grab that super glue and just add in a tiny little dot of super glue. Make sure you're on the right side of the valve, so that's the larger flat side, that's the bottom. Put in a tiny dab of super glue here, making sure that there's just enough glue on it to hold the top of the flap in place, and then place down the valve. While we're here, we may as well do the same with the same valve on the other side. So once again, place it down and use the glue. Remember to use a really small dab of glue, because I definitely used too much glue last time. Tiny dab. Now while we're waiting for the glue in those valves to dry, we can quickly cut out the material that we're going to use in these side filters. This is going to be exactly the same process that we did before when we were cutting out material for the front filter. So I've got my two pieces, let's lay them out. You will have printed something that looks a little bit like this, and this can be used as the template for your filter. Place it down, take your trusty pen and draw out the line. And just like that, we've got our two filters ready to go inside. Hopefully the glue on your valves should also be dry now, so let's start assembling this. So the first step in installing the side filter, take the mask and take one of the side valves, and you're going to have to push it through from the inside. So if you turn over the mask, align it up nicely, and it should just push all the way through. So the next step is to attach the side filter tray. That's this piece here. You're going to align it up with the triangle, and you're going to place it straight onto the side. Now it's worth saying at this stage, if you want, you can apply some hot glue between the side filter tray and the mask to ensure there's a really good seal. But when I pushed this on, it felt pretty firm, and so I'm happy that the seal is good. Next up, use the grommet and place it over the top of the triangle, aligning the braille dot on the grommet with the top point of your triangle. You're now going to need to twist the grommet. You might be able to do this by hand, but if you find it's too stiff, I find it works really well if you grab a pair of needle nose pliers and place them into the notches on the grommet and apply pressure to twist. Now take your filter bottom tray and place it into the bottom of your side filter tray. Make sure that you get this one the right way up. It should be obvious looking at it that the shape of it means it can only go in one orientation. Once you've got in the filter bottom tray, you can place in the filter material that you cut out earlier, and on top of that, then place the filter spring. And this just makes sure that the filter stays down and has a nice seal. Finally, put on the filter cap. As you did before with the front filter, this one is going to be a little bit stiff the first time you do it, but if you just apply a little bit of force, you'll find it'll go on nicely. And there is a little bit of a knack to this, and you'll get it after the first couple of times. You'll get comfortable with it, and it should be easier after that. Okay, that's the first one. We're now going to repeat the process for the other side. Okay, so now we've got our two side filters installed and the front filter, which means the next step is going to be the elastic straps. So we can put this down for now, and we can take these buckle parts and lay them out in front of us, and you're going to need the lighter as well for this next bit. Take your tweezers and your lighter and gently heat up this part of the buckle strap until it's warm enough to be slightly soft. Try and apply the heat evenly along the length of the piece. Once it's warm enough to be manipulated, use your tweezers to twist the piece around like this so that it forms a nice little hook shape. You can blow on it to cool it down. Once you've done that, you can verify that it fits onto your mask. It goes onto this bottom piece here like this, and it should just clip on like that. So let's remove it again, and we'll get ready to bend the other part of this piece so that it fits nicely around the bottom of the jaw. Now it does take a little bit of practice to get this part right, so I'd recommend that you print a few of these so that you can practice first. You want to sort of imagine the shape that this will need to be so that it can be attached to the mask but still go nicely around your jaw and neck. That means that it's going to be this sort of shape. Like I said, it's not really an exact science. You've just got to kind of experiment until you find something that works for you. And once you're done, you should have a slightly irregularly shaped object that you can clip nicely onto the bottom of your mask. So there we go, that's the bottom piece ready. There's now a similar process with the top clasp. Now the top clasp, the parts that attach to the mask are the two with the long, thin arms on them. So take one of these at a time and repeat the process, heating it up slightly and then bending it over so that it forms a nice clip to fit onto the mask. So you can attach this to the body of the mask in the same way that you did with the bottom one. Now repeat the process with the other side. And finally, for the clasp at the very back, you're going to do the same thing one more time. Now this clasp you're going to unhook and hook back regularly when you're taking off the mask and placing it back on. So don't make the clasp too tight because it's got to be easy to do behind your head. So once all is said and done, your plastic pieces should look like this. You should have these two pieces, one of which is bent over in the middle, and you should have these pieces attached to your mask looking like this. So now it's time to install our elastic. So take the elastic of your choice. In this case, I think I'm going to go for this nice thin black stuff. Lay it out in front of you, and you're going to need to cut a 24-inch length of elastic for the top strap and 2 8-inch lengths of elastic for the bottom strap. Now you can do this by eye, it doesn't really have to be too precise, but if you happen to have a tape measure handy, measure it out. So let's start by installing the elastic into the buckle at the back. So for the buckle at the back, you want to take one of your 2 short 8-inch pieces. You want to hold the buckle like this, and then you want to push the elastic through like this. Now you might find that this is a little bit tight or difficult to do by hand, and if that's the case, take the blunt end of one of your tweezers and use it to help you push through the elastic. Repeat this process for the other side of the clasp. And now attach these 2 pieces you've created to the bottom part of your mask strap. So once you're done, it should look like that. You now have these 2 pieces. For the final piece of elastic, let's install that on the top using the same procedure. So you want to take your 24-inch length of elastic and pass it through these buckles in the same way you did before. Okay, and the elastic is installed. So to put it on, let's clip the bottom part around the back of the neck, pull it over, and then use that long piece over the top to go over the top of the head. So now for the very final step, we're going to install the seal or gasket around the outside of the mask, which keeps the mask nicely sealed to your face. To do this, we're going to be using weather stripping. There are a couple of different materials you can use. Ideally, if you're in America, you can buy this stuff from Home Depot. I'll be using a slightly different type of draft excluder, but it basically comes to the same thing. What you're looking for is something slightly rubberized and adhesive that you can use to stick around the edge to form a seal. So first, you want to hold this piece out around the mask just so you can get a rough idea of what kind of length you need. Then go about 2 inches larger than that. Take your scissors, make a cut. Okay, so now that we've cut the right length of gasket, we're going to hold it up around the mask just to make sure it's right. And in the case of this stuff, there's an adhesive strip on the back. So I'm going to start by peeling off 1/2 of this adhesive strip. Then, starting at the bottom of the chin piece, I'm going to slowly apply this around the edge of the mask. Now keep in mind that you don't have to be using an adhesive strip to do this. If you're not using an adhesive strip, then dabs of glue will also work to keep this in place. Once you've gotten all the way around, use scissors to trim off the excess. And then, in my case, I'm going to take off the adhesive on the other side and gently fold it round. Once you're finished, the very last thing to do is to make sure that it's got a good seal around your face. So place the mask on, tighten the elastic if you need to, and then just breathe normally. When you do this, just keep an eye out for the valves and make sure that they're moving in the way that you would expect them to as you breathe in and out. And there you have it. That is how to build a Maker mask in your own home. If you want to build the children's version of this mask, it's exactly the same process, but instead of using this full-size adult body of the mask, you'll be using this smaller children's one. But every other step is exactly the same. And that wraps it up for our short video series on 3D printing and the Maker mask. I hope that you've enjoyed it and you feel like you've learned something. Now get out there and save the world.